Whether you are currently a Social Security recipient or are still working with plans to receive Social Security in the future, one thing is for sure. There are plenty of peanut brains out there spreading myths, misconceptions, and manifestations when it comes to the topic of Social Security. Let's get into it. Welcome to another installment of the Reality Hurts podcast. In today's episode, I'll be diving into the realities regarding Social Security and placing an ass moratorium on all the bullshit that half-wits love to spew within the mainstream media and on social media. You know who I'm talking about. Brainless, uninformed rectal orifices that love to whine and complain, who are constantly desperate to be outraged about something. Let's start with the most basic premise regarding the reality of Social Security. It was never intended to be a source of sustainable income. Social Security was designed as a foundational safety net to provide a message or measure of protection against becoming poverty-stricken during one's retirement years. But it was never proposed as a sole retirement plan. So, for you cockadoodle douchebags that are always whining about, how am I supposed to live on this? When you find out what your Social Security benefit is going to be once you walk away from your former job and making your coworkers miserable. The answer to your pathetic question is, you're not. This is why paying attention in school, learning how to read, and developing comprehension skills are so important. This way, you don't have to go through life being a constant embarrassment to your sperm and egg donors. The Social Security system was intended to be nothing more than a supplement to other sources of income once you retire, such as private pensions, savings, investments, and other sources of residual income in order to maintain a comfortable standard of living or to provide benefits for disabilities. Social Security merely replaces a relatively small portion of the average earner's prior income, merely as an add-on to other post-retirement income sources. Now, if that's still not enough for you to live comfortably, or you never properly prepared for your retirement in the first place beyond the thought of receiving Social Security, then all I have to say is enjoy your dumpster lunches and living in your car, because that's nobody's fault but yours. Now, I know there's a bunch of you out there losing your minds right now over my comment, but as my podcast title states, reality hurts. It's your responsibility and yours alone to prepare for your financial situation come retirement time. I also know that many of you are shouting out various excuses and questions regarding this, as I have been listening to them all of my adult life. But let's go over three of the most popular oldies but goodies that have carried forward through the generations, and I will provide my realistic and fact-based responses. 1. What if I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth? What if you weren't a fucking idiot? I mean, really, let's honestly define what the whole silver spoon commentary actually means. Translation, I'm jealous because you got off to a better start than I did, both of which happen to be relative comments. What do I mean by relative? Well, it means one thing considered in relation to something else. This means the nature of something is not absolute, but depends on the context based upon comparison. For example, a car might seem expensive, but in reality, it's merely a situation of its price compared to other car prices, as well as a potential buyer's income, status, and buying power. Aside from being relative, the Silver Spoon commentary and my tongue in cheek translation are both context dependent. Born with a silver spoon or off to a better start, by whose standard? Which brings me to what I mean when I say context dependent. This means when something is dependent upon various circumstances. I'll give you a simple example. The value of a glass of cold water is very high for someone stranded in the desert as compared to someone sitting in their living room watching TV. So, back to the silver spoon or getting off to a better start. It all depends on the person's perspective and circumstances. If someone grows up in the lowest of income household or neighborhood, then they would pretty much view anyone but themselves as being born with a silver spoon. Now take someone that grows up in a middle-class suburban lifestyle that can only afford to attend a public university but would love to attend Harvard. That person probably sees someone attending a private Ivy League university as someone born with a silver spoon. So again, everything in life is relative and context dependent. It doesn't matter how any of us start out in life. It only matters what we do with our lives once we become responsible for ourselves. We can achieve anything if we are willing to sacrifice, overcome obstacles, and work hard. 2. What if I was born into poverty? What if you grow a brain next week and reality starts making sense to you? First of all, people love to throw around the term poverty. It's the number one talking point for Democrat politicians that love living the high life while keeping their constituents trapped in a governmental tit-sucking lifestyle, but it's far from actual poverty. So the reality is that most people have no idea what actually constitutes poverty. Let me enlighten you. Poverty is officially defined as a complex combination of interrelated factors, including lack of access to basic necessities such as education, healthcare, clean water, and nutritious food. Let me repeat that. Lack of access to basic necessities such as education, healthcare, clean water, and nutritious food. Other factors such as geographic location, inept governments, or corrupt governmental systems put into place that limit such necessities, as well as preventing upward mobility of the masses. Does this sound like anywhere in the United States? I implore anyone to provide me with one community in the U.S. that has no access to education, healthcare, clean water, or nutritious food. This certainly rules out any ghetto or low-income trailer parks. So my recommendation to such perceived self-pity poverty candidates in the U.S. is stop opening your legs for every swinging dick and popping out babies you can't afford. Stop spending your government subsistence on booze, drugs, and cigarettes, and go get a fucking full-time job or a couple different part-time jobs. A quick side note for all you young whiners 30 and under that think life is so difficult today and that you've got it tougher than anyone in the past ever did. Bullshit. Let me clue you in on a secret. Nobody ever said or promised that life is easy, now or 100 years ago. And why? Because life has never been easy for most people. And there have always been people that were more fortunate than others regarding the lives they were born into. It's no different today than it's always been. I started washing cars, mowing lawns, shoveling driveways, and doing other odd jobs starting in middle school so that I could buy stuff for my drum set that my parents couldn't afford. I was so busy that I had to keep a schedule on a calendar to keep track of whose house I was doing what at on a given day, in addition to when people needed something done on the spur of the moment. Every day after school and all weekend long. By the time I got to high school, I always had 2 or 3 actual part-time jobs while still juggling my car washing, lawn mowing, driveway shoveling, and other odd jobs. And I was playing in a band. I had a beautiful top-of-the-line drum set, I bought my first car when I was 16, 3 weeks after I got my driver's license, and I still managed to be a straight A student. I was one busy motherfucker because I wanted to achieve and excel and have money to do and buy the things that I wanted. I was motivated. And for those of you that whine about how difficult it is to get ahead and afford things today than it was years ago, you're talking out of your ass. Cost of living versus wages today is virtually no different than it was when I was your age. My first legit job working as a busboy at a restaurant in 1975, I made $2.15 an hour. Since I was in high school, I was only working about 20 hours a week. So that was 43 bucks a week. A new crash cymbal for my drum set was 90 bucks. So it took me 3 weeks to make enough to buy it, but there were also other things that I needed and wanted to buy with my money. When I went into the Air Force after high school, I was making $422 a month. My rent was $125, so I had $297 a month left for car insurance, gas, groceries, and other spending. So I always had one or two part-time jobs the entire time I was in the Air Force. I worked at a pizzeria, a gas station, and another restaurant to supplement my Air Force pay so that I could have and do the things I wanted. Do you think that any of what I just described was easy? Please. Most of you don't have time to work like that today because your priorities today are fucked up. You're too busy gaming, fucking around on social media, playing on your cell phone or tablet, protesting, complaining about how you shouldn't have to work so much because me time is more important, and generally expecting shit to be handed to you on a silver platter. Fuck off. Which brings me to number 3 of the excuses and questions I hear. What if I can't work? What if you could put together an intelligent thought? And the translation to your question is, what if I'm too fucking lazy to work? Because less than 1% of the population is 100% disabled from working due to catastrophic disability. All you have to do is look at all the people who still work and are motivated, not only with minor disabilities, but major ones, in order to support themselves and get ahead in life, boost their spending power, and prepare for their futures. Paraplegics and quadriplegics that work, some of which communicate and operate a computer with their tongues and are thankful to do so. And many more instances. They have more willpower, desire, and stamina than the rest of us. In most cases, being unemployed due to disability is simply lazy fuckshits that claim disability so they don't have to work, or only have to work very little. And so they can claim free money for sitting around on their asses and expect us taxpayers to carry them through retirement. All you have to do is look at the countless handicapped parking numbnuts that milk their way into a handicapped parking pass, unlike people that really need them. You know the ones I'm talking about? They've got a handicapped parking pass, but they're playing racquetball 3 times a week. There are more people that are actually disabled that still work, make a good living, and prepare for retirements than so-called disabled, lazy butt briskets that milk the system. As for the tiny percentage of folks that have a bona fide type of disability that actually prevents them from working, they have a lot of different programs and assistance that helps them. But that's an entirely different story and discussion for another time and has nothing to do with the Social Security discussion. The reality is that everyone else has the opportunity to work and work hard in order to support themselves, live a comfortable lifestyle, and prepare for their retirement futures. Whether they choose to or not is another story. And for more on that story, see my episode entitled Lazy Butt Nuggets and How to Flush Them. The bottom line is that nobody ever said life was easy or that we will never have to face big challenges, financially or health-wise. This has nothing to do with the intended purpose and applicability of Social Security. So stop making excuses for that. So, how does all of this tie into the Social Security scenario? Well, it's the self pity party, lazy, unmotivated, excuse making, searching for a handout mentality that prevents people from preparing financially for retirement, only to whine about their entitlement to a comfortable financial retirement via Social Security, regardless of their personal shortcomings. The only people that complain about Social Security are the people that never worked hard and prepared for retirement in the first place. And people that are fortunate enough to even live until retirement age have 40 plus years to get their financial affairs in order. I mean, really, if you can't set yourself up for even the most minimal standard of comfortable retirement lifestyle after a 40-year time span, then you've got far greater issues affecting your life than poor finances. Hey, I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about my motivational content that's available on my website. After many successful endeavors throughout my professional careers, I am certainly well equipped to provide advice and motivation to help anyone in accomplishing their goals and fulfilling their dreams. Aside from the content on my site, this also includes my book, There's No Such Thing as Free Shipping and Other Life Lessons for Success. Be sure and check it out, and thanks. Now, back to the podcast. The next thing that grinds my nutsack are all the Dorkasauruses that are pissing and moaning about the Social Security system being broken. As a Social Security recipient myself, I'm here to tell you that it's working just fine, as will all the other recipients, as we effortlessly collect our payments every month without fail. So who are all these ass potatoes whining about this? Dipshits that really know nothing about Social Security and just regurgitate misinformation being spread by other dipshits, as is the case with all other content that travels the misinformation highway. Anyway, there's nothing broken with the system. And as for all of the drama and rhetoric about Social Security drying up and blowing away by 2034, I mean, anything is possible. Cardi B got a record deal. And who would have ever thought that the Catholic priests would be popping little boys in their poop chutes with impunity for over a century? However, people have been crying wolf about the pending doom of insolvency regarding Social Security for decades, just like the world was supposed to have ended 6 times since I graduated from high school. Cow farts, gas stoves, and internal combustion engines were going to destroy civilization by 2005, and half of Hollywood was going to leave the US if Trump got elected. Both times. When things got a bit squirrely with Social Security back in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Congress stepped up with an overhaul program that strengthened it, and everything has been fine ever since. They'll do the same thing again, just like doomsdayers are always predicting government shutdowns, but Congress always pulls through with the deal at the bottom of the 9th inning. That's how politics works. It's all about when things get to a critical point, and then they act. Another thing that has been just infuriating are the toddler tantrums that a cross-section of society have been throwing about the enactment of the Social Security Fairness Act earlier this year. Again, who are these ignorant, uneducated tampon munchers? The same non-retiree wankers I mentioned earlier. They, along with mainstream media and social media dipshits, have had a total lack of understanding regarding the Fairness Act and have been creating totally unwarranted discord with their bullshit rhetoric. So, what exactly is the Social Security Fairness Act and why did it come about? I'll be glad to tell you. And I'll try to keep things as simple as possible for everyone because it can be a bit of a complex concept for those who have never known anything about it. As I'm sure you know, people that work have a certain amount of Social Security funds taken from their paychecks throughout their working years. After they've paid into the Social Security system for at least 10 years, they become eligible to collect Social Security starting at age 62. The amount of their Social Security that they will receive in retirement is based on their lifetime earnings, which also dictates what they paid into Social Security. If they work more than 35 years, the benefit is based on the highest 35-year total. While there are a few other slight nuances that can affect the amount of your Social Security benefit, how I just explained it is pretty much how it works in a nutshell. But let's say someone only worked for 15 years and then they receive a big inheritance and stop working at 35 years of age. Once they reach the age of 62, they will be eligible to collect their Social Security benefit based on those 15 years that they worked and paid into Social Security. That example is very similar to many civil service employees that worked in the private sector for 10 or more years before going into their civil service jobs. Those individuals paid into Social Security all of those years in the private sector and therefore earned the right to collect their benefit for Social Security upon retirement based on those years before they went into civil service. Once in their civil service jobs, they no longer paid into Social Security and therefore would not collect any Social Security benefit based on those civil service earnings. However, this has no bearing on the Social Security that they were entitled to for those 10 plus years working in the private sector and paying into Social Security. So, upon retirement, they would collect their civil service pension and the Social Security that they were entitled to and earned in the private sector before civil service. Anyway, back in 1983, a mentally inept douche-weasel Congress passed two provisions into law that reduced the amount of Social Security that civil service workers would receive upon retirement. Civil service workers being teachers, firefighters, and law enforcement for the most part, but basically any local, state, and federal employees that receive a civil service government pension. The thought process behind the brain-challenged Congress at that time was that it was unfair for those individuals to collect their full Social Security benefit since they were collecting a civil service pension. Translation: Congress decided to steal rightfully earned Social Security benefits from civil service employees simply because they were getting a civil service pension. Their rationale was simply idiotic on its face. The Social Security that they paid into and earned during their time in the private sector was no different than anyone else that stayed in the private sector, other than the amount of the Social Security that the civil service workers would receive would be much less, simply because they worked in the private sector for far less time. And still, the greedy criminals of Congress wanted to take what amounted to about 50 to 55% of that rightfully earned benefit, and they passed it into law. So from 1983 until December 2024, civil service retirees were fucked out of at least half of their rightly earned Social Security benefits that they earned during their 10 plus years working in the private sector before moving into civil service. It's absolutely unbelievable that it took 41 years for Congress to pull their heads out of their asses and correct an absolutely colossal clusterfuck. So, hopefully, you understand why the Social Security Fairness Act was much needed and passed by Congress in December of 2024, then signed into law in January 2025 by President Biden. Because if you don't understand, maybe go back and listen again more closely. Otherwise, the next 4 minutes probably won't make much sense to you. And just what are some of the bullshit rhetoric, myths, and misinformation that rectal sphincters have been spewing like the onset of surprise diarrhea since the passage of the Fairness Act? Let me provide you with a list of things that have been said and spread around on social media or reported in the mainstream media regarding the Fairness Act, just so you'll realize how feeble-minded these ass clowns sound, now that I've explained the realities of the Fairness Act to you. Brainless quote number 1. The unfair Social Security Fairness Act rewards the few to the detriment of the many who won't benefit whatsoever.
You need to shut the fuck up.
Unfair to who exactly? Unfair to people that have no reason to benefit from it in the first place? Unfair to the people that have received their full Social Security that they were entitled to when they retired? I'll tell you who it's been unfair to: all the people that had their rightly earned Social Security unjustly pilfered for decades by the U.S. government cartel over piss-poor legislation that should have never been enacted in the first place. Brainless quote number 2. It's criminal that the Social Security Fairness Act excludes the majority of the U.S. workforce, a large percentage of which are African Americans.
Shut the fuck up!
Again, the people excluded from the Fairness Act have no reason to be included in the first place. Their Social Security was never reduced, so they have nothing to be given back. They have already been receiving their full entitled benefit. And if anything was criminal about this entire scenario, it's the fact that millions of people that had their Social Security benefit that they were lawfully entitled to reduced over some cockamamie rationale proposed into Congress that was then voted into law by a bunch of misfit politicians. And of course, what would any invalid argument be without throwing in the fucking race card? Not only that, let's get one thing straight. They're Black Americans. None of them ever lived in Africa, nor would any of them want to live in Africa, or they'd be there. It's time to shut the fuck up with that bullshit. Brainless quote number 3. The Social Security Fairness Act simply gives away money to some local, state, and federal workers who will now benefit unfairly while the rest of the workforce gets screwed.
Shut the fuck up.
First of all, the rest of the workforce has and will continue to get their full Social Security benefit that they have been and are entitled to. So they're not getting screwed in any way whatsoever. As for the workers that benefit from the Fairness Act, what they were getting before the Fairness Act was unfair and downright criminal, and they were getting screwed. Because of the Fairness Act, they're finally getting what they are entitled to, like the rest of the workforce. And here are a few others that I will list, but not go into in any detail over. 1. The Social Security Fairness Act undermines the fairness and integrity of the Social Security system. 2. All the Social Security Fairness Act has done is unfairly rewarded people that already get pensions. 3. The Social Security Fairness Act is a fiscally irresponsible law that unfairly benefits civil service employees. Okay, you all get the point. This is just another glaring example of people talking out of their asses about something that they completely do not understand, which then needlessly spreads misinformation that facilitates dissent and worry and divide among the population for no valid reason whatsoever. This is one of the biggest problems in our society today. Now, up to this point, it's just been non-retirees bitching about things they know nothing about that I've discussed so far. But that doesn't absolve helpless retirees from taking some heat over their own douchebaggery. 2 recent developments have a group of rotary dial telephone users in panic. Exactly what are these 2 developments that have these drama queens hyperventilating into their COVID masks? 1, the closing of a slew of Social Security offices across the country. And two, the discontinuation of paper checks. Listen, my fellow varicose vein teammates, get with the fucking program, eh? It's called internet access and direct deposit. What exactly is the problem? 2 years ago, I signed up for Social Security on their website and set up my direct deposit to my US bank, all of which took less than 15 minutes. I've never been inside a Social Security office in my life, and Social Security has been direct deposited on the second Wednesday of every month like clockwork into my bank account. And please, don't tell me that you don't know how to use the internet or don't have internet, as it's been around since what, 1994? Long before you ever retired. And by the off chance you're still watching regular TV with a roof antenna, then you certainly know someone that could take care of that simple 15-minute process for you. That way, you can focus on setting up your 11th COVID booster. Well, that wraps things up. Yeah, I know. Reality hurts. So, until next time, keep it real.